To set the stage, it's 2012, and I'm in Stuttgart, Germany, studying architecture. I'm there with my wife, Elaine, and my daughter, Ada. So at about age 2.5, after a year or so of observation, Ada was diagnosed by her doctors with autism spectrum disorder. You might hear some noises. That's my daughter coming to watch the presentation with you. So we had just gotten this diagnosis, and those same doctors, they told us we should head back to the States as soon as possible and get her enrolled in specialized therapies. The States is the best place to do it. So within a month, Elaine and Ada were packed up and on a plane to Naples, Florida, to live with my parents, to enjoy a little bit of golf, but to also get them involved, get Ada involved in her therapies. So at the same time, I was on the short list for a position in architecture here at the University of Michigan. Fortunately, that worked out. But it meant that I needed to head straight to Ann Arbor so that I could set up shop and start to arrange things for Elaine and Ada and their eventual arrival. So this kicked off a really challenging time, of course. We're just learning about autism, and now we're split in these two locations. So it was a difficult period, but of course we, visited each other a lot, and, we had a lot of video chats in the meantime. But the issue is, as a part of Ada's autism, she's nonverbal. So she can't form words. We can't use that as a way to converse. Additionally, unpredictability, it causes her a lot of anxiety. So trying to hold conversation through video chats on an erratic schedule, I actually ended up damaging a bit the relationship with my daughter. And certainly, I had no chance to understand anything about this new diagnosis of autism and what it meant to our family. So this lasted for a while. Thank you very much to our contractor for taking 1.5 years on our home renovation. But finally, we were reunited in Ann Arbor. This was a joyous moment for us. But unfortunately, it was just a moment. It kicked off a journey of, of years of struggle to try and understand her, to build a relationship, to build a shared language, and ultimately earn her trust, knowing that isn't going to come from words. So to understand her is to understand that she is so connected with her environment. And when she has the capacity to shape that environment for herself, she shines as this amazingly creative individual. But even in those moments, social interaction is challenging. Like others with autism, developing those skills to interact socially and understand the back and forth is challenging. The thing is, Ada really is a social animal, and she wants to welcome people into her world. It just needs to happen on her terms. She needs to be the author of that environment for it to work. So now, how am I supposed to understand? How are we to learn from someone that doesn't have words? How do we learn what her terms are? So this creativity, it often becomes apparent in the times when she looks out of place. So it's in the moment when she's being misunderstood, or in the worst case, when her actions are being seen as unacceptable. Now, if I put my architecture hat on, this was quite intriguing to think environment. How does that influence, the physical things around us? How does that influence behavior and perception for someone like my daughter? What turned out to be most interesting was actually the opposite. It was more exciting to explore how someone like my daughter can transform environment and turn it into tools for communication. And when you understand that, you see in the moments when that ability, that capacity is prevented, these are the moments where a lack of acceptance of her occurs. So if we think about architecture and environment, we can think about a collection of symbols. There are symbols that inform us how to use things. They also inform us the expectations of misuse. So let's go to the playground and think about the slide. So there's a ladder that informs us how you're to climb to the top. There's this smooth, slick surface that says that's where the sliding is going to take place. And there's an angle that says what's the top and how you're going to go down, and might imply how fast all that's going to happen. Now, Ada certainly enjoys going down the slide. So it was weird in these moments when we saw her climb to the top, but not want to come down. I started to connect that with the moments that I had just prior to that said to her, I think we need to leave soon and head home. So by finding that distant position on the playground, so high up, out of my reach, she was finding a way to communicate. She was creating words that said, no, we're not leaving now. So what becomes amazing to me is her placement on that object, the wagging of the tongue, the enthusiasm on her face. This is a language that she's concocted completely of her own and doesn't include any words. But we do have a problem here. So generally, we all have this shared experience on the playground, and it has told us the very hard and fast rules for how you use a slide. Now, for someone like Ada that's differently abled, whether it's physically or cognitively, she's not going to have that same shared upbringing. Her paths through education are going to be very different, and the way she navigates through the world is going to be very different. So because of that, she now is that child that stands out because she's different. And she stands out in a bad way. She's now that child that's creating the logjam of children on the ladder who can't get up to get on the slide. And I'm that obnoxious parent that is allowing her to act this way. So in this moment, I would define that environment, that slide, as being not inclusive. So you might think, how do we respond? Well, okay, Ada needs to learn those rules and abide by them. But based on this story, wouldn't that mean that we're robbing her of those words that she so ingeniously has created? So the reality for us is that we only go to the playground when there's no other children around, so that we can avoid this lack of acceptance. So what Ada is being robbed of is the ability to develop and practice those critical social skills, those ones that are so challenging to her. And that social experience that is so fundamental to the playground that happens every day and is a fundamental part of that experience for everyone. So how do we allow this creativity, but also avoid this bias and these burdensome expectations? So you might think, well, let's walk a mile in Ada's shoes. Let's figure out how to relate to her. Let's have empathy for her situation. Is there a moment that we might be able to feel like her? Well, I'd like to argue that I think that's just not possible. So to try and explain that, when I was in Germany, I tried to learn the language. It didn't really sink in. It didn't stick. What I found myself doing was listening for only the German words that sounded like English ones and missing everything else in between. In some cases, okay, that works. For Butterbrezel, there's a pretzel, it has butter. Sure enough, one of my favorite snacks while we were in Germany. But you come upon another word, ananas. Not sure what it sounds like, but it looks like banana. You're going to get a pineapple. So I will never be able to understand how Ada experiences people and the spaces she moves through as a translation of my own experiences. So that form of empathy about the ability to relate, to put yourself in someone's shoes, I just don't think it works. What I might offer as an option is to think about awareness, empathy as awareness. And there's layers to this. So the first layer, we think about an awareness of finding a successful moment where we've built a connection with somebody. Well, that connection, if it's with somebody, the success of that can only be defined collectively with both people. So as an example, learning with Ada what her definition of taking a selfie is. But there's also an awareness that before you figure out that shared moment, you know nothing. And when you know nothing, that can impose great burden upon someone else. Like what happened in the sadness and confusion that I caused Ada, thinking I could take over the role of sleeping with her at night. But there's also an awareness that Ada and others like her, she is incredibly resilient. And thankfully that she is resilient because that allows me to now persevere through that first failure and try again. So eventually we figured out a nighttime process that worked for both of us after a few more tries. So this form of empathy, it's daunting, and obviously there are moments that are quite painful. I sort of think of it as an unending scientific process, just constantly having to test new methods through trial and error. So how do we embrace this empathy and start to learn what is this way in which Ada constructs her environment? What are the ways in which it works for her? How do we build this awareness to understand how she exists in the world, and we can join her in that? So the key thing that I had to learn in this process was that as a parent, I needed to lose all of my intuition and past experience, anything related to parenting. If I was to learn, I could only learn by experiencing things with Ada. I had to be her student and she my teacher. So if she's going to teach, then how is that going to happen? For that to happen, she needs agency. So she needs that ability to see her environment and take all those things in her environment and turn those into tools for communication. So if we're talking about environment, it's a big place. There are lots of places to go, lots of things to discover. So to learn this way, it means going on as many field trips as possible with her. So I might suggest that instead of thinking that we can walk a mile in Ada's shoes by just watching this presentation, I'd actually like to bring her on stage, have one of her wonderful babysitters, Tori, come with her, and have her show a bit of herself to us and learn her version of what's an interesting environment. Hi. Hi. Yeah, you ready to show? What do you want to show? The horses. We love the horses. Look at you on the horse riding. Yeah, is that with Bonnet? Is that with Bonnet and and Hannah? Is there another one you want to show? What's the next one? Oh, you want to do the car ride? Okay. There we go. Look at that in the car with Emma. This is a part of our daily routine to drive her around the back roads of Ann Arbor. Are you comfortable? Which one do you want to see? Which one? You got to point over here if you want to see one. Yeah, you can point there too. You want the water? Okay. Let's see look at that. We love water. Okay, one more. You got one more. One more. You want horses one more time? Okay. Yeah, was that at your camp this summer? Oh, you don't get this one. Okay. Can you turn? Look at everybody seeing you out there. Can you say bye-bye to everybody? Okay, you go this way. Yeah, you did great. You did great. Thank you. So thank you very much for allowing that to happen. So to decode that a little bit, Atta's agency to me is really about mutability. It's about the ability to create moments where there's always a give and take, and that she can regulate the degrees of those relationships, the back and forth. So as compared to the completely immutable slide and the hard and fast rules that were happening there, you think about the rhythms in trotting or walking or cantering with a horse. The different degrees of tactility that you can experience in just splashing water. Or the range of multisensory experiences that you can build when you control all the bells and whistles inside the car. These all have a clear cause and effect relationship, and Atta is in the middle of those and has access to all the dials. These are the key moments. And in these moments, she's really creating a conversation with environment. And it's all about these sensory activations. So now the question is, how can we join in that conversation with her? So around this time of starting to build this understanding with her, in my lab at the College of Architecture, we were developing these sensory-rich environments with the textiles that we had been making. To make these textiles, we used these elaborate knitting machines, these industrial knitting machines. Normally, they're used to create things like sweaters and fancy knitted sneakers. But what's interesting is if we take those materials and we use that machine, we can take all that tactility and these shapes and textures from these human scale products, and we can now build it at the scale of architecture. But I saw this problem one of the first times we did that. When you call it architecture, everybody thinks it's this pristine object. You're just supposed to take pictures of it and walk around it, stand next to it. But I wanted to see what could happen when we think about somebody who might step inside it and think it's some weird sweater that you have to try and fit in somehow. So we wanted to create this architecture that had these give and take qualities that we've been talking about. And it has these shapes and spaces that are so foreign yet interactive that it dismisses those expectations of what you think architecture might be. And when we do that, then we fit right in Atta's wheelhouse. We allow her to enter this world and just figure it out for herself. One of the first prototypes that we created, Atta really showed this connection between creativity, exploration, ingenuity, communication, and agency. She did so by choosing the nosedive as the best way to experience this space. But what really starts to work when I see that I'm not walking in her shoes, but I'm walking a mile with her, this smile tells us something's working. It's this moment that she decides she wants to do it again and figures out I'm a critical component to that process. So I'm now speaking through her sensory language. She needs me, I need her, as a way to accomplish that nosedive one more time. So I still argue that I can, and maybe I shouldn't try to understand her sensations or motivations, but I can be a part of that physical language, that sensory motivated language and interaction. At the same time, I can still speak in my own language about architecture and assess, is this environment giving her, is it facilitating the level of creativity that she needs to be able to communicate? She has this amazing spatial awareness and spatial intelligence, but it's just so often that she has to exercise all that energy to defend herself against misunderstandings and false expectations. So I just ask myself with this work and as a parent, how do we take these creative moments, and in those creative moments, can we learn something individually as unique individuals? And can we also learn something collectively? So I've tried to make this talk about common ground. And in this case, common ground, it needs to be about the ability to contribute. So not just observing, not just participating. Contributing to something new, a new understanding. So when we think about common ground, you might think, well, we're finding common ground. Might jump to that word. But really, in finding, I think you're mining these past experiences again. And that's going to be exclusive of the new connections that we're trying to build. So I think it's really about building. And it's about building common ground. So me, I took that literally. I'm in architecture, so I actually built things. But the theme is to create this canvas where children can invest, anyone can invest their creativity and for themselves on their own terms figure out what is this thing and what is it for. So I also think that it isn't about one single common ground. It's about discovering many common grounds. We're not trying to find just one method. There isn't a magic bullet. Every time someone enters one of these spaces and imagines it in a new way, creates it something for themselves, they become a part of the creative process. And I don't do that. That's not a part of making it an inspiration. It's just for equity. So agency equals communication. That ability to lead the construction of a new shared experience. And the more of those we do, the more volumes of common grounds we create. And for me, I found this as the one way that works to build that trust with someone who I want to celebrate is unique, and celebrate the fact that they will always be very, very different from me. Thank you very much.